Why did Babylon collapse? Well, they failed to remember that God established them as a nation. There was something else they failed to do. They failed to remember that the devil is just outside the door. Do you know that in this passage, that King Belshazzar called a party, and the Medes and the Persians were camped outside the gates of the city? Now, how stupid is that? It's we've got nothing to worry about syndrome. Nobody could ever touch us. Maybe here's what the Babylonians thought. Number one, that they were big and mighty. Number two, that they were invincible and indestructible. Maybe they thought sincerely that they were secure and untouchable. Yep, America. We as a nation have led the world. We've won many wars and saved many other nations from disaster. We send more aid to help more people around the world than anybody combined, more disaster relief than any others. But the Bible tells us that the devil is as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Belshazzar thought he could just party his troubles away. He became intoxicated by his own sense of self-worth. He became satisfied by his own lust for life. He became blinded by his own treasure chest. He became completely bamboozled by his own comfort zones and his own position of dictatorial power. He became the victim of his own interpretation of taking the fifth, believing honestly that he could say anything that he wanted without fear of legal ramification, that he could make utterances and decrees without being held accountable to the laws of God. And God showed up and said to him, you have been weighed in the balance, and your days are numbered. There's something else that they forgot. Lest we forget, they failed to remember that freedom is not a license for immoral behavior. Never forget, many years ago, being in a very, very remote part of northern Mongolia and into inner China, I was in a place where the gospel was not allowed, where the church is persecuted. And everywhere I went, they had one TV channel on their meager television sets, and it came out of America. And that one channel was MTV. We the people. Look at us. The Babylonians were so blinded by their refusal to see the hand of God that they could not see the relationship between their moral decay and their national decline. Their moral decline led to their spiritual decline, and their spiritual decline led to their moral decline, because moral depravity invariably leads to spiritual depravity, and spiritual depravity invariably leads to moral depravity. That's why God is who He is. That's why Jesus said, remember this until I come. That's why He pointed to His death. He said, if you don't remember me, you're dead, because you've got no life, you've got no moral compass, you've got no standard, you've got no forgiveness, you've got no hope. That's why I want to invite you to give your heart to the Lord Jesus Christ. We the people, one nation under God. I am an American and proud to be, But I am a Christian man, and I cry out to God for this beloved country that's adopted me as a son, that God would reach down and He would do something that we cannot do for ourselves in this beautiful land of ours. But number 4, and I'll close with this, they failed to remember that God will not be mocked. God will not be mocked. Babylon was now in full crumble mode. It was a downward spiral. You can go and trace it. They became proud and arrogant. They ignored the enemy. They lost their self-respect. They followed an ungodly leader. They lost their moral compass. They disrespected their spiritual roots, and they began to openly and unashamedly challenge the face of God. And so the end was announced. And when the end was announced, 3 things happened. Number 1, verse 5 says, God spoke. Verse 6 says, the king became frightened. And verse 13 says, God's man showed up. It's interesting when God's man showed up in the midst of the revelry and the debauchery. What God said. Yes, this is the job of everyone who claims to know Jesus Christ, and the job of every preacher. Yes, this is the unpopular sound that rings across the hallways of our hallowed institutions in this nation that we love. But God will not be mocked. Thus saith the Lord.